guess HORNER. Tell us about your this organization that you're a part of, Competitive Enterprise Institute.
Well, CEI is what you call a classical liberal think tank. That is limited government, open markets, wealthier is healthier, wealthier is cleaner, individual liberty, and so on. We aim to, for example, argue for sound energy and environment, generally economic policy, understanding that every day is Earth Day when you own the property, and so on, that people greatly misunderstand. When wealth is targeted as the disease, well, just look at places that have environmental problems and those that spend an utter fortune to address environmental issues, and you understand that wealthier is healthier. Wealth is actually the cure. But as part of this, I initiated a major transparency campaign for them. I've been using the Freedom of Information Act and other laws for years, just trying to figure out behind these policies what's actually being discussed privately. And so that's another component of what we're up to. For example, you remember cap and trade. Politicians were publicly saying, don't worry, it won't cost you anything. I had my doubts about that, and I had worked with a European think tank in Brussels for several years, and I knew it, in fact, would cost quite a lot. So I obtained a memo from the Treasury Department saying that, in fact, the justification for cap and trade was revenues, which is strange for something that doesn't cost anything, and that internally the Treasury Department was saying it could cost as much as the corporate income tax. Ours is the highest in the developed world, which is $400 billion a year. So that helped in our advocacy to educate the public about cap and trade. So it's fairly diverse. We generate research, we advocate, we litigate. We're in court right now on several of the things I reveal in my new book, The Liberal War on Transparency, and we educate.
Talking to Christopher Horner, his book is called The Liberal War on Transparency. What motivated you to write this particular book?
Well, things like the Treasury memo that were the Supreme Court has said that taxpayers have a right to know what their government is up to, and that was their term. And they pointed out that bureaucrats have a resistance to this, as do politicians. That we had a law in effect since 1946 to let people obtain access to records, and that the government was using it as a law to find ways to keep records from us. And I have to remind you, every transparent government was, the progressives got this right. I mean, this was a Louis Brandeis, Woodrow Wilson idea. Sunlight is the best disinfectant, Brandeis wrote, and electric light is the most efficient policeman. He wrote that in a piece called Other People's Money, which is perfectly fitting for this Freedom of Information Act and the state laws that everybody can use, all the way down to school districts and city councils. And I make that the last chapter in the book is a how-to, because everybody needs to do this. If you have a suspicion, if you have a hunch, if you have information, ask. So I was encountering a divergence between public arguments by people who wanted to coerce more money out of us, expand government, and so on, limit our freedoms, and things they were saying privately. But I also began to discover a real escalation admitted by some liberals, not the classical liberal type like we are, but what we Americans call liberal now, admitting that, in fact, the body that claimed it would be the most transparent administration ever was, in fact, the least transparent administration ever, calling them very bad compared to their previous supposed worst, George Bush, and so on. So I decided to put together what I was finding, but also the real, and this is the key, the very disturbing tactics they were using. I'll just give you a quick overview. They are avoiding creation of records. For example, they've moved government over to AOL, Gmail, private computers, and private servers, if you can believe it. And I give you examples, and I'd like to discuss with you. They are hiding records that are created, and I go through the tactics. They behave like spies. They have dead drop zones, safe houses, code names, and so on. They use cutouts, industry lobby groups as their go-between with groups like the Center for American Progress and so on, so you can't find out what they're really doing with these groups. But we found ways to find out. And they're actually destroying records. I've even, in the book, I reveal an affidavit from one activist government agency that they have an ongoing document destruction operation. It's an affidavit that's now with the court in some litigation we have in Washington, D.C. for records about activists in government who are setting up, for example, private websites, third-party supposed websites advocating for more government being run out of the government office. And yet they're bringing in private computers to access records as a way to, and by the way, setting up a system to destroy the records when they're accessed, just completely wiping them out. And then saying you can't search my computer for traces of these records because it's mine, even though it turns out it was bought with taxpayer money. Secret accounts, orchestrating the deals with industry for Obamacare on AOL. I mean, it shows you a real commitment to hiding what they're up to. And so this is something that people need to know about. I mean, this was a real, you have to know about this. Look what they're doing and how they're doing it, and please get involved.
Talking to Christopher Horner, Horner. Mm-hmm. He is author of the book, The Liberal War on Transparency, and he's with the Competitive Enterprise Institute. He's a senior fellow there. How do you get a copy of your book here, Christopher?
Well, Chris Horner online, as well as there's some basic information there, and I'm going to start adding some content now. The book just came out, sort of a transparency blog, but it's available at Chris Horner online or in bookstores, or if you prefer Amazon or something, it's also available there.
Your book, Red Hot Lies, How Global Warming, from 2008, How Global Warming Alarmists Use Threats, Fraud, and Deception to Keep You Misinformed. Has that whole cause been totally discredited by now? I don't think the American people take it seriously if they ever did.
Right. There's a raging debate acknowledging that, in fact, the ClimateGate scandals of 2009, 2011, a lot of revelations affirming what I'd written in the book, by the way, including the very specific characters who were central to that book. Red Hot Lies were the ones who were central to ClimateGate. That really sealed the deal. And if you didn't believe it, then you saw how the Senate, controlled by Harry Reid, chose not to take up the cap-and-trade bill. But anyway, real quickly, you're hearing a lot of it now in the context of this Frankenstorm. So when the economy recovers, it will come back.
Oh, I just don't think even liberals in this country, with the exception of the ones who have been having this as their cause for a long time, like Al Gore, I just don't, they're not, either they don't believe it anymore themselves, or they know that the American people aren't interested in hearing about their global warming theories any longer when we got these extremely serious issues facing us, like the economy and our foreign policy and other things. We'll be back with Christopher Horner after the break. You are listening to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. I'm Tim Wildman with John Riley, and we'll be back in a couple of minutes.